And I always wake up my morning on a Sunday to a column written by a gentleman who I have a very, very high respect for. He's a former independent senator. He's an Express columnist. He's a past president of the Law Association of Trinidad and Tobago and a senior counsel, Mr. Martin
Now
Daly.
trying to put up Mr. Foot.
Good morning to you, sir. How are you?
I am well, thank you, Rennie. Good morning.
Good morning. It's good to hear your voice once again. Always that burst of sunshine is what I hear there, and that is very encouraging.
Well, we have to try.
Yes, oftentimes when you get to analysts, there is that it's a heavy day, but you've got that exuberance there. I like that. The Attorney General on Friday warned, in light of the April 15th sunsetting of the Miscellaneous Act, which includes the anti-gang legislation and bail amendment bill, that the release of up to 1,300 persons in remand are now being considered for bail by the state, including those facing charges of kidnapping for ransom, and it could be a security risk to the country. I remember the 1986 movie The Fly. That fly warned, be afraid, be very afraid. So, Senior Counsel Daly, how afraid should we be?
Well, I think the thing we have to be most afraid of is how badly our country is governed. It doesn't matter who's in power. It's how badly the country is governed and how the nuts and bolts of what makes a modern state tick are left unattended until we have a crisis. So that's really what we need to be afraid of. These periodic bouts of fear, in my view, really derive out of the fact that we simply don't look after the country's business. And so many of our objectives are just materialistic, and we just don't look at underlying social conditions and problems that have been facing us for years and years and years.
You know that's the voice of Martin Daly, right? Okay. And it is a case of you cannot just walk on the manifestation of the soil. You have to look at what caused it in the first place. All right. More judges, more court hours, personnel needed to correct this situation. It means more money. It's expensive, but as you said, it is more expensive when we have a situation like this. So it begs this question. When money was aplenty, why was this not corrected?
Because everybody, including our leaders, not only in the political sphere, were just too busy having a good time, 500 US set at the Hyatt and so on, and leaving the underlying social conditions unattended. And not all of the solutions require money. Huh? I mean, there are a lot of creative things that can be done that don't necessarily require money. Let me give you a list of some of the things that have been left unattended.
Please.
I think I left the Senate must have been 2001, just before the tied election. And during my 9 years there, the question of the abolition of preliminary inquiries in criminal cases came up for debate. It got nowhere. And I mean, I'm very bad at arithmetic, but 14 or 15 years later, we still haven't abolished preliminary inquiries. It's still being talked about. It's still being touted as a remedy. Well, the expenditure on that would not be great. Yes, you may have to have some more judicial personnel, but not a lot because it's basically preliminary inquiries will now be done on paper with a sufficiency hearing. But we just haven't been able to settle that. That is not very costly. Then the whole question of conditions in the prison. I mean, again, going back into history, I mean, I've been around a little while. I was involved in some death penalty cases for the state many years ago. Let me say by the way, I appeared in at least one of those cases in the Privy Council and asked the government only to pay my expenses. So lawyers were not always fat cats. I mean, there are times when you have to do some public duties and you have to give back and so on. But that's en passant. And at that time, prison conditions were a major ground of appeal by persons on death row to say that they were already suffering cruel and unusual punishment and the death penalty should not be carried out in those circumstances. And that, of course, was preceded by Bishop Abdullah's report into the prisons many years before that. And I think my business partner, Mr. Prescott, was involved in an inquiry into the prisons around that time. So that's another matter that's been left unattended. Now, to create some sensible conditions about bail. There's a very useful discussion in one of the newspapers today by my colleague, Senior Counsel Jairam, on the question of this whole business of electronic monitoring, which is where I think you want to bring me. And, there'd be a lot less apprehension if for good grounds. Well, that's good grounds. You're not just going to take everybody in your remand yard, put an electronic bracelet on them and let them out. I mean, these things have to be rationally done. They have to be done by reference to objective criteria.
And there must be the technology to support the actual monitoring
Absolutely.
of these devices.
But
yes.
we passed an act called Electronic Monitoring Act. It became an act in 2012. And it's never been proclaimed into law. Now, this whole business of proclamation is another story, but it's never been proclaimed into law. So we are now, what year are we? 2016. Now, 4 years later, we are scrambling to acquire. We said to be scrambling to, well, government won't accept scrambling, but that's what we're doing because we face a crisis. We're now scrambling to acquire the equipment, to set up the monitoring unit, and so on and so forth. Now, the question arises, it doesn't matter who's in power. If electronic monitoring, or ankle bracelets as they're laughingly called, if that was a modern crime fighting or modern law enforcement tool, it really doesn't matter who passed the act and who operationalizes the act. The point is it was sought to be something that the country required. And really, whoever was in power, who came in, who went out, we should have been working on this. And just shows a lack of political will, shows a lack of preparation for office. Nobody in opposition on either side really prepared properly for entry into office. Manifestos or general broad statements. Well, one of my sources tell me that there are quite a few national security policies lying around that have been unimplemented or uncoordinated. And everybody keeps talking about a crime plan, a crime plan, a crime plan. The crime plan we need is basic law enforcement. And that's why we've got into all this trouble about bail and all this business, because we've simply neglected the nuts and bolts. The crime detection rate is poor. It's always been poor. They try to blame the service commissions, but a lot of the powers of the service commissions have been delegated. Have they been used? And these are all fun. These are all nuts and bolts things that don't necessarily cost a lot of money. And we've got to get hold of our situation and grease the nuts and bolts, change them when necessary, and get on with the business of governing the country.
The voice you're hearing, listeners, is that of former independent senator, Express columnist, past president of the Law Association, and senior counsel Martin Daly. We are talking about a not proactive but reactive governance is what we are looking at, and that serves nobody at any time. The AG said there are 2,300 individuals incarcerated in remand, of which 1,000 of them are facing murder charges and thus not entitled to bail. Of the remaining 1,300, how many you think can be released from remand if we looked into the area of plea bargaining as part of the backlog solution?
Exactly. We have been talking about plea bargaining. The late Dana Sita wrote a lot about plea bargaining. I didn't check before our interview this morning on what is the status of the plea bargaining legislation, but it's not working. It's like we have DNA, but it's not working because the nuts and bolts are not being attended to. The Chief Justice has now been, for want of a better word, piloting in Trinidad something where if someone has an indication of what their sentence is, they may plead guilty because they're not leaping into the dark. But all of these things have to be operationalized. So yes, plea bargaining is something else we've been talking about, but I'm not aware that it's widely used. But of course, if you think you can beat the system, then there's no need to plea bargain. And that brings us back to why is the judicial system not sufficiently effective? That is not simply the traditional deterrent that it's supposed to be. It actually stimulates people, including the criminals, into doing business differently, such as plea bargain. But if you think you could beat the system, why bother to plea bargain?
The Attorney General said that he's having discussions. He's been having discussions, and he did say the Chief Justice is aware of what's impending here. He's been having discussions on what could happen come April 15th. How prepared would you say, and I know it's almost a rhetorical question, but I'll ask it anyway, how prepared is the judiciary to deal with April 15th with the little heads up they have?
Well, I simply don't know, but this heads up was a long time in coming because of the sunset clauses. It should have, in a properly run business or country, you should have a plan B, and plan B was, what if this legislation is not renewed? What if the sun sets on it? Do we have a plan B? And I mean, I'm sorry to keep harking on the difficulties at the more macro level that we have to solve. I mean, could I give you another example of nuts and bolts? It doesn't have anything to do with law. I heard a very charming person, guest of yours this morning, towards the end of an interview, talking about quality service delivery, and the government must get behind quality service delivery.
Yes.
Now, with no disrespect intended, that's a lovely phrase. But if people have to take people have to get up at 3:30 in the morning, prepare their lunch kits, drive into Port of Spain, spend 2 hours driving into Port of Spain, they're spending 3 to 4 hours on the road one way, or 3 to 4 hours both ways. You think they're in any position to give quality service delivery? You think they're in any position to smile when you meet them in a service center in the morning? And that's another example of nuts and bolts. All these fine phrases don't mean anything unless you deal with the underlying social conditions. We have a massive transport problem in this country.
Yes.
People in my office, the staff in my office arrive to work at 6:15 in the morning. From time to time, we kind of start looking at flexi time, but then the problem is we might have flexi time, and that might be fine for the work that's internal, but in terms of external work,
nobody else.
People we deal with may not be on flexi time.
That's
so
right.
This is another thing that we have to come to grips with.
And that is why in the
Ministry
beginning,
of Labor is talking about, there are alternatives to retrenchment and so on. But these are fundamentals we have to deal with.
this is one of the reasons you made the point, which indeed is a fact. It does not speak to any specific administration. It is something that we've been looking and postponing for a long time, because even though I remember, while trade may not, the merits or demerits of having a trade service is a whole different discussion. However, there was a time when that should have been put at the top of the list, because there is no way you can have the infrastructure that's not changing. There is no way you can put an eminent domain to take anything away, because you have to reorganize entire communities. So there is no way that we could not have found either the mass transit as a solution and or alternating how many vehicles are allowed, alternating the numbers or something, some kind of pattern to cut down on the volume of vehicles on the road. Because yes, you're right. You cannot have a cheerful disposition after you've spent 3 hours just getting to where you had to go.
And that's assuming you get a car fairly easily. I mean, if you have to punish for long hours, that just adds to the problem. If you're on a rainy day, it's almost a physical fight. People can't be cheerful and give quality service delivery in those kinds of conditions. And so I'm afraid we have a nuts and bolts problem, and no one takes a long view. I mean, I am very much a person who believes that good governance requires getting people's buy-in. Buy-in is the jargon phrase. I don't like jargon phrases. And all this thing about, have odd number of vehicles coming in one day and even number of vehicles, anything that involves licensings or permissions or whatever, then involve shortcuts, corruption, favoritism. We got to stop this business of trying to have rules in a situation where if my cousin have a odd number vehicle, I will swap with him or a partner in the license. Well, let me not say the licensing office. I might somehow obtain license plates that I can put on and off. All of these things that assume a kind of social cohesion that we simply don't have, because so many of us are laboring under a sense that there's no objective justice. And if people labor under that kind of sense, they are not going to be cooperative. Never mind smiling in an office, is simply not going to be cooperative.
It is one of the reasons.
Part of having nuts and bolts at work is people's sense of grievance and his constant sense of I am being victimized will be mitigated, and the place will become more friendly and more efficient. We can't just be friendly when we party or win a gold medal. We have to be, we have to find a means of peacefully coexisting. And a lot of these nuts and bolts things have to do with that.
precisely why for this guest I left the longest period of time,
Oh,
Martin Daly. We can go into one subject into the other. I want to bring us back closer to the shore on the question of the sunsetting of the Miscellaneous Act. The Attorney General states what we are doing is factoring the access to bail for the 500 odd people who are in jail, granted bail but cannot get out of the system. It raises the question of the criteria for bail, which is the surety, which is land and cash. Is it about time that we got this straight into a case to ease this backlog and deal with this crisis we have here, the urgency of this, that we consider other ways outside of just property?
Point today, a former president of the Law Association makes a point today that bail that is based on property is discriminatory against the poor.
Yes.
And so it may be that bail conditions, depending on a person's sort of economic background and so on, you may have to look at conditions that are part property. Somebody has to take a risk. Mm-hmm. Somebody has to vouch you and take a risk with bail, but you may have to look at bail conditions that are part property-based and part electronic monitoring-based. And Jairam makes all those points today. They're not my points. They're all part of the wider discussion and is going on in the society. Mm-hmm. But we don't have electronic monitoring as an option because we have an unproclaimed act and we are not ready. And we have no plan B, and nobody's been thinking about this in a long view. So all of these people who were previously not eligible for bail will be now applying to the courts. So yes, of course you're going to have a rush of bail applications, mm-hmm. and the courts will have to deal with those, and no doubt they'll have to put aside other matters so that people have more don't have ordinary kinds of matters in the courts. Well, their trials will be further delayed and so on.
Well, many believe, Senior Counsel, that this will not only be a windfall for criminal attorneys, but it's also believed that former magistrates and judges should be contracted and assigned to special sessions like night courts and so on to assist in this situation. Is that a possible avenue to explore?
Absolutely. If you have a remand yard that is not of a sufficient size to deal with your customers in inverted commas, you have to have alternative solutions. And then, of course, there was the Archbishop's suggestion about people who have been on remand longer than the maximum sentence. Mm-hmm. And I hear people saying, we still have to have paperwork, you still have to record a conviction. For goodness sake, if somebody has already served the maximum sentence inside in stinking conditions, and they are stinking mm-hmm. conditions. Mm-hmm. I know this because of my involvement years ago in the death penalty cases. We have to have alternatives. We have to become more humane. We can't just be, don't worry about them, they commit a crime, it don't matter if they rot in jail. You can't build a just society like that. So yes, of course, you need to have night courts. And yes, of course, some provision has to be made to accommodate. If you're expecting a flood of bail applications, you have to make provisions to accommodate them.
It's interesting that you say that because those who insist that you should not follow the recommendation of the Archbishop seem to be more interested in punishment than justice.
Well, I wouldn't like to put it, it's unusual that I'm less harsh in my interview. I wouldn't like to put it as bluntly as that, but that's what it boils down to. Mm-hmm. I don't see any rationale for paperwork or recording a conviction or paying compensation if someone has been detained for a crime longer than the maximum sentence of the crime. That just mm-hmm. doesn't seem to me to accord with the principles on which a civilized society is run. And sometimes people have to give a little in order to build things. And I thought the Archbishop made a wonderful proposal. I accept it's unconventional. I accept people would escape without a conviction. But my goodness, they have been detained for the longest while. And then when we come to conditions of detention, let's point out something else as well. So Jamaica rightly put pressure on us about Jamaican nationals who are detained. Mm-hmm. But what about all of the people from other countries, particularly African countries, that the Emancipation Committee has been talking about? Okay, they may not have any economic, they may not be able to put any economic pressure on Trinidad and Tobago. Well, where's the fairness in that? I'm happy that the Jamaicans are going to be released, but where is the fairness in somebody who has been in there an even longer time, mm-hmm. and there's no one, using a form of economic pressure to get them out? we can't run a just society and things like this. And you see, people sit very comfortably and say, oh, don't worry with all of that. But if their child get hold, then it's a different matter.
Mm-hmm.
And so then they see it differently and they berate lawyers and so on. But when their children get hold, well, let me speak properly, when their children are apprehended, then they then begin to see the system in a completely different light. And God forbid it could happen to people who are better healed than some of the people detained in jail, and they won't like it very much. And you know, today it's Peter and tomorrow it's Paul.
One of the reasons I'm very reluctant when I hear celebrants of somebody's hardship, because we are only one arrest, one day, one paycheck away from being in that situation. I know
Absolutely.
exactly.
That is a very profound statement. And it's time everybody in society wake up and realize that gates in your community and all these things can't protect you, particularly where your children are concerned. They're out late at night. They can get into altercations. They could be thrown in those kinds of conditions. And so they need to wake up and realize that ultimately, well, you made a very profound statement. You're one day, one paycheck, one incident away from finding what you think is a better educated or a better healed child in those conditions. And it's wrong.
Professor Ramesh Diosaran echoed the oft-used justice delayed is justice denied. And as you said, if folks are inside of there and they cannot even get a chance to get before a magistrate and they serve all that time inside of there, what's the sense of keeping them there? I do want to ask you a question that borders on the political, and everything really does. There's no way you can get around it. We have articulated a number of problems we are going to face come August 15th. One of the things that it raises the question, cognizant of the challenges to the country, was the opposition irresponsible by not assenting to the extension of this miscellaneous act?
Well, I'd like to put it differently. There is a very respectable school of thought that thinks, regardless of the fact that the opposition passed that legislation, it's unconstitutional and objectionable. So I think we just, scratching the partisan surface doesn't really help us. The question is, what modern provisions we should be making for bail instead of trying to cut corners. Bigger problem I think you're looking at is because of the politics of I don't always like to quote Bill Clinton, but it's his phrase, because of the practice of politics of personal destruction, there has been very little cooperation over decades between governments and opposition, and you have the ridiculous spectacle of somebody saying at one time something is good and then saying another time it's bad, and giving what are really facile excuses. I'm not poking at the present opposition. It applies on both sides of the house. And that is something else that doesn't seem to make sense to me. But, I suppose it makes sense because power here means access to the National Cash Register, and that's all people care about. They don't believe in the exercise of power for the ideal of the greatest good for the greatest number. So I might be a dreamer, but I still think that is an objective that we should have in any sensible society.
You're listening to Sunday Brunch on 107.7. I am Rennie Bishop. My guest is the esteemed Senior Counsel Martin Daly. We're looking at the Miscellaneous Act, which is sunsets on August 15th. We are going to see on this sunsetting also the anti-gang legislation and also 22 years of amendments which happened on the bail law of Trinidad and Tobago. Explain to our listeners the anti-gang fallout when this bill sunsets.
Well, again, because of the draconian provisions in that legislation, it's a lot easier to keep people in detention than the usual route of charging them with something, trying them, and they're either being acquitted or punished. And it comes back to the whole question of if law enforcement is not efficient, the detection rate is not high, then you start cutting these corners. There may be a good argument for anti-gang legislation, but it can't be reactive. It has to be properly thought out, linked with many other things. And so, again, one can't just look at these things in isolation. And there's never been any plan B. And I keep saying, I don't want to bore your listeners, but that crime plan, the only crime plan that makes sense is one that enforces the existing laws fairly, objectively, and without regard to color, creed, class, race, money, or any of those things. That's the crime plan we need. And then we can start thinking about more sophisticated things.
What?
I mean, all this eye in the sky and all this business. What has it got us? What has it really got us? It hasn't got us anywhere. And the DNA legislation was passed, but it doesn't appear as though we're properly equipped. I heard the Prime Minister speaking in tones of admiration of what he saw with DNA in Jamaica. So we have all of these things, but they're not. I believe the jargon word is operationalized, whatever that means. I mean, if something is not operationalized, it's either you don't have the money, you don't have the competence, you don't have the will. There must be a reason it's not operationalized, or because you're busy chasing down the National Cash Register to win an election to get access to the National Cash Register.
That is in a different talk show, sir.
Well, I mean, there's no point trying to discuss with me a specific piece of legislation or a specific thing, because rightly or wrongly, I have a view about the way our society functions and doesn't function.
I am going to ask you, Senior Counsel, for a couple of, because, and before I ask you for the recommendations, where we go post this crisis, let's assume we surmount or we postpone, because more than likely it seems as though we're postponing the problem. But I want to get to that in a minute. I more specifically want to ask you the question, with what is before us? Why you were in concert that we should have night courts. You were in concert that we should bring in a couple of former magistrates and judges. What is the problem in doing that, in your view?
I don't have any idea what is the problem in doing these things. I simply don't know. We've been talking about them for decades and decades. I don't know what the problem is, any more than I know what is the problem in not using the performing arts and sport as a means of putting people on a different path. I mean, you can't lock up everybody in a society. You have to provide some alternative kind of lifestyle, an alternative life pattern.
That alternative...
We have all of these talents. I mean, we were supposed to have this basketball program, and it got some fancy name and plenty of money, and Shaquille O'Neal came here. And that was the end of that. We should be growing performers and nurturing performers and sports persons to get jobs abroad. The Dominican Republic and all Cuba and all these places have baseball players and basketball players that get opportunities abroad. And that gives people an incentive other than just you're going to get $1 million if you win this tournament. So it provides a whole kind of, yes, ultimately it has money, and I want everybody to make money out of their art. But you must have some kind of objective that just doesn't have grabbing money at the beginning or in the middle of the trail to success. And we should be, doing these things. I mean, it's not an original idea, and we are a long way away from bail, but we wouldn't need to be so worried about bail if we had less people going to jail.
We have to find slow ways of doing this.
And there are ways of doing these things, and we talk a good game, but the nuts and bolts are not there. And Daly will bore everybody to death by talking about what seems to me to be very practical things. I devote a lot of my time now to mentoring. I'm not rich enough to be a philanthropist. I wish I was. I devote a lot of my time to mentoring. I interact with a lot of youth. And I see what the potential is, and I see what it takes to keep somebody on a better path, on a less fatal and a less deadly path, if you can stimulate their imagination to think about something else.
Alternative sentencing is where we have to be creative too, because if we found different ways of having exacting something for society from law offenders, it would be useful not for us to put them in jail and continue to swell these numbers.
Jail, flog them, jail them, flog them, jail them. We've had talk about national service. I mean, I have some problems with that, but I don't think national service has to be national service with guns. But none of these things are coordinated. They're all ideas floating out there. They get operationalized in fits and starts. You spend a lot of money. The means by which you get into these programs are suspect. Favoritism is always a worry about these programs. If there are objective criteria, they're certainly not well known. And so, to me, these are very basic things that we have to deal with.
post this crisis, Senior Counsel Martin Daly, post this crisis, give me the top 3 things you would like to see, or the top 5 things you would like to see approached seriously, not just with lip service, but with some real action that you think will in fact impact the madness we have in the judiciary, in the justice system in Trinidad and Tobago.
That's dead easy. First thing is the use of the performing arts and sport to set young people at risk on a different path. For example, I have been to the Brooklyn Panorama twice because of my interest in steel band. I've been to the Panyards in New York, in Brooklyn and around New York twice. I went to a schoolyard where a band called Sonatas was performing under the baton of somebody I know from All Stars. At-risk children who enroll in that after-school program to play our pan music get credits in school as a result of doing that.
Yes.
Now, isn't that a simple example of using the performing arts or sports?
I am familiar with that, and it does work.
Around. Well, you're familiar with it.
Yes.
Then the next thing is we have got to accept that locking up everybody is not a solution, and therefore, if people do encounter the criminal justice system, we have to have a range of options that don't simply involve throwing them in a cell with 10 other people and locking it up and saying, okay, we've solved the problem. We have got to make these remand conditions and so on better. I don't want jail to be a holiday, but we got to make them better.
Yes.
And we've got to be conscious of the fact that they're discriminatory. The third thing is something has to be done about the crime detection rate. Some people will put that at the top of the list, but I prefer to be optimistic because of the young people I engage with. So that's 3 things, and then now you come down to some very specific things like the electronic monitoring, the abolition of preliminary inquiries that take up so much time in the magistrate's court, a ticket system that works for a whole range of offenses other than motoring offenses, littering offenses, motoring offenses. Noise pollution is another big problem that we have here. We talk about bringing tourists here. When I have foreign guests for Carnival, I sleep on Arabida Avenue, not on pavement, but I sleep on Arabida Avenue. And the first thing the foreign guests want is earplugs.
Yes.
You can't have a tourism business based on music. You're busting people eardrum. So we have to have ticketing, effective ticketing. My 4th thing is we have to deal with a lot of things by tickets rather than by the more formal processes of the criminal law.
Every time I've gone in that direction, I get eyes from Trinidadians asking me if I want to tax them indirectly out of compliance. My thing is, I agree. I am in concert with what the Minister of Finance says. Sometimes you introduce these things. One, it would help the exchequer, but at the same time, you introduce it for behavioral modification.
But of course, if you don't want to pay the tax, then drive it within the speed limit. Don't drive on the wrong side of the road. Don't noise pollute. Don't do the range of things that can be dealt with by ticketing. We also have to look into, the 5th thing is, we have to look at what is done in developed countries, specifically in England. They have this whole concept of antisocial behavior. Short of the more traditional criminal methods, you can get an antisocial behavior order against persons that in effect put them on some kind of personal curfew. You don't need a state of emergency for that. But all of that of course, has to be researched. I mean, I only read about it. I visit England occasionally. I read about it. My goddaughter who lives in England, actually living soon to marry a policeman. And I've discussed with him what part of his workload involves dealing with antisocial offenses, people drunk and puking in the road and that sort of thing. And that's another whole range of reforms that we haven't begun to discuss here, because not everything needs the full process of the criminal law and lock up in a cell.
And
things are important.
Things don't happen by accident. There is a gateway to antisocial behavior. There is a gateway to unacceptable antisocial behavior. It starts from antisocial annoyance. It starts somewhere and you continue. I want to go back to something you mentioned, and this is about imprisonment. We cannot just put people in jail. I did not hear you mention that we have to change our attitude towards rehabilitation, because oftentimes if you put, as you know, you put someone in jail, they spend the time, you flog them, whatever, then you put them them back out, and the only rehabilitation they had inside of there was really a certificate, a graduation, as it were, of how to better do the crime. You put them back in the society, then your revolving door will keep swinging faster and faster.
Well, that raises one of the things that raises is the whole question of adult literacy and an education below what used to be called fifth standard and so on. That raises a whole different question about adult literacy. But essentially, Trinidad lies to itself about the literacy rate. We keep talking about this high literacy rate. I know one or two good souls who work in the prison, work in the adult literacy program, and some of them work in prison. And they have some very interesting stories to tell about, the helping people to break the stigma of not being literate or fully literate and so on. And all of these things matter. You can't expect somebody to go out there and vie for a job if, for no fault of their own, they're not fully literate. It requires a literate world, and then it brings the whole question now of teaching people to use electronic technology, people who don't have the opportunity or misuse it. None of these things are rocket science. They just require political will and money that is properly and objectively directed.
Senior Counsel, let me pause for a moment. I've got some bills to pay because I do have to get paid. Let us take a break, and we will.
Understand that very well.
I know you do, and you don't even work for the Attorney General office.
I pay mine. I don't rely on any government favoring me. I pay my bills as best I can. Because a few people hire me.
All you get at? Okay, good. Senior Counsel, hold on one moment, please. We'll return. We'll return with my guest, Senior Counsel Martin Daly, after this.
Looking for a way to boost customer service in your company? Let DRA Consulting show you how to create eager-to-serve employees who extend warm, welcoming, courteous, and helpful service to all of your customers. Join the movement to exceptional customer service. Visit us at draconsultingtt.com or call DRA Consulting at 622-6762 for a free customer service consultation. Move up to exceptional service today.
Glorious Bodies, Glorious Minds Day Spa has more exciting news. It's not too late to get the beach-perfect body you desire. Your goal is within reach thanks to our guaranteed Liposarge Slimming Treatment, which also decreases the appearance of cellulite and is totally non-invasive. We treat targeted body areas for quick results. Glorious Bodies, Glorious Minds is the only certified spa to offer the slimming benefits of Liposarge. Schedule your free consultation in Trin City at 640-8209 and on new location upstairs Extra Foods compound in Arima at 225-6643. We dare you to look and feel your best.
Mr. Chow's Smokehouse and Juice Bar, 139 Tragareet Road, opposite the Oval. This is different. Healthy, organic, fresh ingredients. Mr. Chow's Juice Bar. How do you like your smoothie?
I add chia seeds and flax.
A little cane sugar?
Pineapple, mango, and passion has hit the spot.
No sugar?
Banana, strawberry, and lemon juice.
You choose honey or agave.
See that watermelon, apple, and guava? You had to try that one.
Low fat, no fat. Almond, soy, no milk. Do it your way. Mr. Chow's Juice Bar. One visit, and that's it.
It is currently 11, make that 11 minus a couple. It's actually 6 minutes before the top of the hour. Let me thank my guest for being with me, Senior Counsel Martin Daly. I just want to conclude on one thing, sir. Do you think the nation would have learned? I mean, you articulated exactly what you and a couple of learned folks have looked at. This is nothing new. There is nothing surprising here. Do you feel there is a better appreciation by the general public that they have a part to play in pushing the elected official and their government to get some of these recommendations you mentioned at least at the table? And do you feel there is a willingness by the new blood currently in the judicial system to get some of these things done?
Well, I think the public, I lie a lot. And I think the public of Trinidad and Tobago are very smart. They understand the value of all of these things. But we have had for decades a tremendous leadership crisis in the country. And I don't just mean political leadership. I don't know if it's because the government is so dominant in the economy, but it's very hard for people to take leadership positions and operationalize some of the things we've been talking about. And as long as the gravy train is flowing. Now, we haven't even touched on the question of what's to be done about marijuana, by the way, but that's a whole other hornet's nest.
Yes.
But I think there's a genuine leadership crisis in the society. And when young blood get drawn into the political arena, people attack them before they even have, and that applies to whether they're UNC or PNM. People attack them before they can even get out the gates, or worse, they get seduced by the validating elites. They learn what is a golf club when they didn't know what a golf club was before. They learn what is a Brandy Alexander because they didn't know what is a Brandy Alexander before. And there is a whole, Mr. Pandey's made some very interesting statements. Is that nothing to whether you like Mr. Pandey or not? And this whole question of the oligarchy, never mind whether it's parasitic or not, there is a complacency among the better off people in this country that's quite shocking. Because they don't understand that these things will catch up with them soon. But then I suppose they have papers for a way. I don't know. I don't understand. I mean, I just don't understand the complacency.
I do understand it because sometimes I wonder, even if they think the gated community will protect them, the fact of the matter is the boundaries for where you can gate has been going further and further to the sea.
Yeah, well, don't start me on gated communities.
One day the beggars...
I have strong views about.
As Valentino said, the beggars will not only come to town, they will be in your front step. On your front step.
Well, as Shadow immortalized, they'll thief your microwave and, well, you don't have Channel 13 again. They thief your microwave and think it's a TV. But it don't matter if your house getting vandalized. I mean, it's just absolutely appalling. I mean, the complacency in the areas where leadership could come from is absolutely appalling. But what to do? That's the country we live in. I've long since reconciled myself to all of this. I make myself available in the cultural sector. I make myself available for mentoring. I help one or two young people. I don't want no medal. I only talk about it because people then, the first thing they say about people who have ideas is, oh, well, you ain't going to politics. You ain't win a seat. You have no right to say anything. But I have to defend myself by pointing out that I'm doing things. It might not be the conventional things. It might not be the jacket and tie things. Because I've long since reconciled to myself that in this country we have to save souls one soul at a time.
Right. And maybe a good answer to them would be that is why I am still a believer. Because I have not entered politics.
Absolutely. I have little people tucked away all over the place. My wife helps me with them. And they don't want money. That's another thing. They just want encouragement. They just want somebody to say, you're not doing a bad job going along this path. I don't want anybody to discriminate against me. I don't want anybody to make sexual demands that I can't fulfill. Just give me a little open path to do my thing and run along.
I can think of no better way to start my week than to spend the time with you, former independent senator, express columnist, senior
counsel.
Counsel.
Is very kind of you. I'm sorry to have such strong opinions, but I live in the real world and Trinidad today.
Well, I don't really want any opinions that are not strong.
Okay, well, I'll
thank
keep
you so
that
much,
in
sir.
mind.
You have yourself a wonderful day, and thank you so much for taking the time to be with us.
Thank you, and good morning, and happy Sunday to your listeners.
And a happy Sunday to you too, sir. Thank you so much. I want to thank all my guests for being here this morning. From Jamaica, Cecil Toms, senior producer of Nationwide Radio at 5. Also want to thank Professor Nicole Smith, research professor, chief economist at Georgetown University Center on Education in Washington, D.C. Dawn Richards stepped in to us. We talked about customer service. Customer care, as she said, should be the new watchword. Asha Lovelace talked about the African Film Festival, and of course we concluded with Senior Counsel Martin Daly. I want to thank you all for being here this morning and invite you to join me Monday through Friday from 6 until 9 o'clock for the morning show with my co-host Michelle Borrell. You have yourself a wonderful day and a great week.